welcome to When Death Awaits, Episode 3. Today, we're doing things a little bit different. We have a great guest here with us today. We're very thankful for him for joining us. I'll have Uncle Rich introduce him soon. He's a dear friend and colleague. Obviously, you know myself, Umar Hussein. We've got Chris Ramirez with a sweet stash, Uncle Rich. And I'll kick it over to Uncle Rich to introduce us to our esteemed guest.
Sure. I am really honored today to introduce a friend who, by the way, is still working at our Homicide Bureau with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. He has a number of years on the department, but more than that, I find it intriguing because he's assigned to homicide where I was. But more than that is the fact that he has handled so many high-profile cases. And what's interesting about that aspect is the fact that you are not chosen. They're arbitrarily given to you. And in this case, not only did he get assigned that case, but he did exceedingly well to where he actually ultimately not only was able to bring the case to a closure, but ultimately get a suspect in custody who ultimately is paying the price for what they did. And I know many of you probably out there have probably seen Detective Aguilera on TV on a number of occasions. He's the good-looking guy with the great-looking hairdo, and I just want to let you know that it's a truly an honor to have you here, Louie, because the fact is that you and I have worked together, over 30 years, and I worked with Louie, and on top of that, he's still working, and that, in my estimation, is something that's so admirable. And so thank you for your service, Detective Aguilera.
Would you say that he is more hardworking than you are?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and with that said, Louie, why don't you go ahead and give us a little background on who you are and how you came to come to Homicide, and what drove you to come to Homicide?
Yeah, I started on the Sheriff's Department when I was 18, 19 years old as a community service officer. I've been sworn as a deputy for the last 36 years. The last 27 years I've been a detective. When I joined the department, I had two goals only. And the two goals were to be a gang detective and to be a homicide detective. I never wanted to promote. I didn't want to move on to any other units. I just wanted to do those two things. And I've done that. I was able to accomplish that. I was a gang investigator in South Los Angeles for 12 years. And for the last 17 years, I've been a homicide detective where I've handled about 400 homicide cases. And like Rich said, we're just randomly chosen. If you're up, whatever comes up when you're on call, whatever comes across the phone lines is what you get. We don't specialize in anything. You're supposed to be an expert in every type of death at Homicide, which is the best part about working the job. When that phone rings, you don't know what you're getting. You have no idea. Getting into the job, I was about 7 or 8 years old. I witnessed a homicide in the city I grew up in.
Where was that?
That was in Santa Fe Springs, where they actually killed an ice cream man who was on his routine during his route. I was waiting about 40 yards away and saw faces that I recognized from the neighborhood, from the gang neighborhood. Storm in there, you hear shots fired, they run out. The ice cream man's dead. And at that point, I knew I wanted to do this job. I wasn't thinking as a homicide detective, but I knew I wanted to go after those kind of people. I wanted to make those people that ran out of that ice cream truck after killing that man who was earning a living, for his family. I wanted to go after them and make them pay for what they did. It's not personal at all. None of my cases are personal. If you take a case personal, it's going to affect your investigation. It's going to cloud your judgment, and that's what you don't do. I teach classes a lot, homicide classes, and I tell people, once you make it personal, you're done. Your investigation is going to go downhill. People always ask me, I've handled numerous deaths, murders of children. And they say, well, don't you want to punch that guy? You're sitting in a room with him, you're interviewing him, and don't you want to reach across and punch him or grab him by the neck? And I said, no. Why? I go home to a nice house. I've got a family. I drive a nice county car, courtesy of the Sheriff's Department. I don't want to lose all that. Like, this guy sitting across from me isn't worth it. Here's how I'm going to punch him in the face. I'm going to make him pay for what he did. I'm going to put a good case together and make him pay for the rest of his life for what he did to that family. So at that point, going back to the 7 or 8 years old, I knew I was leaning towards law enforcement. When you grow up in a neighborhood, gang neighborhood, you think the only way out is through sports, right? So I was a baseball player. I boxed as a kid. I knew, maybe baseball would be my out. Coming out of high school, I had college scholarship offers to several colleges, but I was a mama's boy. I remember my dad drove me to Loyola Marymount University, which was 25 miles from the house. And I remember driving there because they gave me tickets to watch their games, their baseball games. And I remember driving home and telling my dad, this is too far. I'm not going to live out here. There's no way. And my dad's looking at me like, well, you're an idiot. What are you talking about?
But you had an uncle who you looked up to who was a traveling baseball player. So you still wanted to just stay home?
I did. I saw the sacrifices he made, going through the minor leagues. I remember going to see him play in Visalia when he was playing for the Twins. And I wanted the life, but minus all the hard work. Mm-hmm. But then at 18 years old, I was playing at one of the local junior colleges. And my girlfriend, who ended up becoming my wife, got pregnant. So I was an 18-year-old father. And my dad said, well, college baseball isn't going to pay for it for a family. Here's an application for the sheriff's department they're hiring. And that was it. Took the test, took the written test, did well, did the oral exam, did well, passed the background, and get a phone call on my birthday, you're hired. Wow. And I've been there since.
Amazing.
Interesting. And Louie, I know we could talk about a whole lot, and I know we're here to talk about a case that you handled, and I know when you ran it by me, and I'm hoping that everybody else will be just as intrigued with what this case involves in light of that. And I just, before, I want to preface this particular case with your gang experience. You and I both work street gangs together. We both have some familiarity with the politics associated with it. And more than that is, how does that fit into this particular investigation in terms of not just going in blindly, but being able to understand the complexities of it by way of that wealth and breadth of knowledge that you have regarding conducting this kind of an investigation?
Right. I think what helps the most with gang cases, because the majority of our cases, as you know, at Homicide are gang murders perpetrated by gang members. So growing up in a gang neighborhood, you get to know their lifestyle. You get to know their mannerisms, how they act, what they do, why they do it. So that's huge. It's hard to get someone that grew up in an affluent neighborhood. And I say this in a nice way to some of my friends that I know grew up that way. You can't get a guy that grew up in Newport Beach and tell him, hey, go work South Central LA and infiltrate the Crip gang. It's hard because they don't get it. Mm-hmm. Or I want you to go and infiltrate the Mexican Mafia. So I knew a lot of gang members. I was never a gang member. Back when we were growing up, it was the belt buckles that had the initial of the neighborhood that you're growing up in. And that was the initial of the gang. First time I asked for it, I think I took a backhand and a forehand to the face, said, you're never going to get a belt or you're never going to wear that hat ever. And I said, okay, I'm done. I'm done with that thought process. So, I had really great parents growing up, which steered me towards sports and kept me busy. Went the Catholic school route. But I knew a lot about gangs going into the department. So that's why I wanted to work gangs. And gangs for us in the sheriff's department is the minor leagues to get to the major leagues, which is Homicide. You work closely with Homicide while you work gangs, and that's what I did. I was fortunate enough to go to a South LA station, Lenox station, and work Crip and Blood gangs. And then I went to a task force that actually infiltrated the Mexican Mafia. So we did a wiretap on the Mexican Mafia basically it was a cold case murder back in the city of Industry. And while we were on a wiretap for that case, we ended up getting a murder for hire involving the Mexican Mafia. And there was a federal mafia versus a state mafia war going on at the time. So I knew a lot about the mafia. I learned even more working that case, which was about a year on a wire. We ended up getting about 15 indictments on it. So going into Homicide, I had that gang expertise, and I had the expertise of the mafia, working in plain clothes, infiltrating the mafia.
And for the layman, like when I, you talk about that Newport Beach kid, that's me, right? I didn't grow up in Newport Beach, but I grew up in a semi-affluent neighborhood now in
Right.
Southern California. When you're talking about gangs being the minor leagues and homicide being the major leagues, when you're working gangs, or I would naturally think that there's just a lot of murder involved anyway. So
Yeah.
why aren't they blended? Why aren't they one and the same?
Well, here's the thing about gangs, and I tell people this all the time. Gang members are a threat to other gang members or people who they perceive as gang members. So gang members aren't going to go randomly pick on you and I sitting in a restaurant and kill us because they see us as a threat. They're going to pick on someone walking down the street whom they perceive as a threat, as a rival gang member. To me, the most dangerous people, and we see it all the time, are the mentally ill and the homeless people now, because they can't differentiate right from wrong because of mental illness or drugs or whatever the issue is. And a lot of them are carrying firearms now. They'll have no problem with walking up to you while you're sitting in a restaurant with somebody and sticking you in the neck. We've seen it. I've handled cases very similar to that. Gangs are territorial, right? So they're territorial by nature. And if you don't grow up in a neighborhood like that, you don't understand that you see they are territorial. And working gangs, when I was working in South Los Angeles, South Central, you don't see kids playing basketball in the front yard. Young African-American, Hispanic teenagers won't be shooting hoops in the front yard. They won't go to the local park in the front yard and shoot hoops or play catch or play ball, whatever the case may be, because they're a target. And who are they a target of? Not the gang that grows up and lives in that neighborhood, but a rival gang coming into that neighborhood. So when you grow up around it, you understand it, and it's an easy transition once you get to a station and start working the gang unit. People that grow up in affluent neighborhoods, they'll get it eventually, hopefully. But then they have to learn to talk to these people, to talk to gang members. And when you sit across from a table, you have to be able to have a conversation with someone you suspect as being a killer or someone that's attempted to kill somebody. And you have to have a good rapport with them. You can't talk down to them, because the moment you start talking down to them and being disrespectful, or what they deem as disrespectful, you lose them. You lose your audience. So it definitely helps. Like I said, growing up in a neighborhood. Not saying that an affluent person can get it and eventually understand it, but it does take time.
Thank you. I mean, that background is amazing setup, and I don't want to delay it further. I want to get to the case that we're talking about here. I know it's probably gang related, and it's there's gunshots involved. I don't want to bury the lead, but you mind taking us through that day? I know you got a call. You didn't know what was coming for you. What happened, if you can get us from like the beginning to the end?
Yeah, so it was April 19th, back in 2016, and I got the phone call probably about 10:30 at night, and we've had this discussion before. Those are the worst times to get a call. 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I could do a 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning call all day because I've had sleep for a few hours. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, you probably haven't gone to bed yet, unless you're really disciplined and put yourself to bed at 7 o'clock at night. You know you're going to go for a day and a half on no sleep. That's the worst part. So I remember the phone ringing, and they said, "Hey, you have a murder in the city of Industry. Multiple people shot. It's definitely gang related. Suspect information, all we have is a black Dodge Charger and a couple of shaved head gangsters."
And what's the location?
The city was Bassett, and that's out of Industry Station. It's in the San Gabriel Valley, and those that are or are not familiar, it's right off of the 605 between the 10 and I'd say the 210.
That's such a LA response.
LA County.
Where you tell someone where it is. But for any of our listeners who are not from LA,
have no clue.
You see those beautiful mountains when you fly down to LA. It's around that area to the south.
Yeah, exactly. You see the San Gabriel Mountains. You could probably from there see the downtown LA, the skyrise. So it's industrial area. It was a restaurant filled with people at the time. They had an outdoor eating area and a taco truck, and then people were eating as well. So by the time we get there, it's probably 2.5 hours or so, depending on how long it takes me to do my hair that night. So I'm assuming that was a quick hairdo night. Once we get there, we're briefed by the patrol deputies on what the circumstances are as to what they know at the time. And deputies told us they responded to this location, to this restaurant, regarding shots fired, multiple people down. When the deputies get there, they find a female victim in her 50s who's wounded. They also find a deceased male, shaved head, obvious gangster, by the front door of the restaurant, and he's in his 30s. And then there's blood drops leading away from the restaurant, going east on the sidewalk, which we knew another gunshot victim ran in that direction. And then there was blood shots going the opposite direction in the parking lot, which we knew another gunshot victim was, and got into a car. The whole incident, they said, was captured by surveillance video from the restaurant. At the time we get there, deputies are scouring the neighborhood looking for that particular victim that ran east down the sidewalk. They're following the blood drops. They lose the blood drops about a half mile away, which tells us it was in the middle of the street. He probably got either carjacked somebody or went into an awaiting vehicle or just was picked up by a random civilian. We did some background at that time, and we found out that our dead victim was named Dominic Gonzalez. Dominic Gonzalez was 38 years old at the time. He was from a Van Nuys gang, and he had some Mexican Mafia ties, and he was just released from federal prison about a year prior. So at that time, I remember looking at the video, and in the video, I was inside the restaurant. The deputies were showing me, you see 4 people sitting inside the restaurant, 4 gangsters, obvious gangsters, and these weren't youngsters. These dudes have been around. 4 of them are having a meal. After the meal, they get up. One of them goes to the window that faces Valley Street, which is a really large street, heavily traveled. And he's probably looking for any deputies, police officers in the area. He's just peeping it out because he knows this is one of our suspects, what's about to happen. He comes back to the table and they hug it out. They do the bro hug, the handshake, and they walk in line. So the 2 suspects are in front, followed by the 2 victims. As soon as they walk out and clear that front door, they execute Dominic Gonzalez. One of them just turns around and shoots him in the head, drops him. Dominic Gonzalez's friend, who's also 38 years old, like Dominic was 38, he takes a gun out, and you see him now shooting it out with the 2 suspects. Now both suspects are shooting at Dominic's friend. While they're shooting at each other, they wound this female who's having dinner with her husband, and you see everybody in the patio area in the front just ducking, crawling, running for cover. You see the smoke from the gun. It's a hellacious gun battle. And then on their way out, the 2 suspects put more rounds into Dominic Gonzalez as they're walking out. He was already dead from the first shot, but they wanted to make sure he was dead. Obviously, you see Dominic Gonzalez's friend as he's running. You see him, he's holding his stomach. During that gun battle on video, you see him take a shot in the gut. It looks like a good stomach punch, and you see this a lot, and I know you've seen it. They'll double over because that's what the impact of the bullet does, and knocks the wind out of you. So he's the one that's bleeding, running eastbound down the sidewalk. Somehow one of the shooters gets clipped in the leg. Now he's limping, running into a Dodge Charger. Both of our suspects get into a black Dodge Charger, and they crash. And this is important because they crash into a parked vehicle. They take off, last seen eastbound, away from the restaurant. So I take some photos of this video and of the suspects, and I send it to a good friend of mine who was, at the time, he's retired recently. He was California Department of Corrections gang guy. He was the guy. If you ever wanted to know anything about gangs that were going on, especially the Mexican Mafia that were going on in prison, bleeding out to the streets, he was the guy. So I sent him a photo of the suspect, and he calls me back like 2 minutes later. And he says, that's Joe Loza. Joe Loza is a Mexican Mafia gangster. He's been in prison. He's 34 years old. He's been in prison in and out for the past 18 years. I mean, he's been in prison most of his life. Hardcore gangster. And the youngster, That's Leonardo Antolin. He's from the same gang. He's only 21 years old. Joe Loza, I believe, was 37 at the time. Joe Loza is the guy for the San Gabriel Valley. So he's the guy. Nothing happens without him. I tell him who our victim is. He says, yeah, Dominic Gonzalez. He's been warned by the mafia for collecting taxes in an area where he wasn't supposed to. So that meeting essentially was to warn him for the third time. Normally you don't get 2 warnings.
Louie, can you explain what the tax thing is? I think that's a very integral aspect to the Mexican Mafia's influence. Despite the fact that they're incarcerated, they still have influence on all these neighbors.
Yeah, they definitely have influence in all the gangs on the streets, and these gang members will abide by their rules because they know at some point in time they're going to go to prison. And they're not going to do well in prison if they just give a big FU to the mafia and say, we're not paying taxes. So what they do is they collect taxes on behalf of the mafia. When I mean collect taxes, they'll go into the mom and pop stores in their neighborhood and say, hey, you got to give us money for protection. We'll make sure nothing happens to your establishment. Nobody tags it up. Nobody robs you. No one will come in here and hurt you. But in order for us to protect you and your business, you need to give us money. And then that money in turn goes to the mafia and those in custody. And they'll also collect taxes on the drug activity and what they do with the drugs. All narcotic sales will go to the Mexican Mafia, some of them. So Dominic Gonzalez, and geographically, you're given an area, you're given a territory. So there's people in prison, lifers, that are calling shots to the guys on the streets and telling them, I want you to collect in this neighborhood, I want you to collect in this neighborhood, and so on and so forth.
And these people all abide by it because they
100%.
know that eventually they're going to go to prison, and in prison they'll need the protection as well.
100%. So if you go in an area geographically that is not yours and you go collect taxes, you're going to be in a world of hurt. And Dominic Gonzalez was doing that, and he had been warned. And the only reason why he had been warned a couple of times is because his dad was a big-time gangster in the Mexican Mafia, his stepdad. Dominic Gonzalez's brother, a year prior to this murder, had been killed for the same reason. So he was going outsourcing his own work, and he got killed for it. So he gives me the background, my buddy from Department of Corrections, and he tells me, yeah, this is definitely a hit, obviously, by what you see on video, but this is what's going on. Oh, by the way, the feds have been on a wiretap on these guys for a year, and their main target is Joe Loza. So here's a couple of FBI agents. I think you need to get hold of them, tell them, hey, your prize jewel of the RICO case just killed somebody. So we met with them about a week later. Great guys. And it was funny because at the meeting, they had some guys from other police agencies, about 5 guys. And 4 of those guys, I had actually co-signed for to be cops. So when I was back in 1988, when I was a young jail deputy, I was a boxer for the department. And I was training kids in fighting, at-risk youths, we called them, before it was a popular thing to do. Back in 1988, in my off-duty time, I was training kids to box. So 3 or 4 of these kids that are now cops were kids that I trained in boxing, which is pretty cool, right? That I felt like maybe I had some type of influence on these guys' lives. And they ended up to be really good cops. It's funny because they're now retired and, my dumbass is still working. So we had this meeting, and they said, yeah, we've been looking at Joe Loza and the gang for RICO violations. And Joe Loza gets his order from David Gabaldon, who's a lifer in San Quentin. And this was a sanctioned hit. We knew this, and we said, great. We know who our suspect is. We're going to do our investigation, but we're going to expedite this investigation. They wanted us to put a pause on it so they could start writing their search warrants for their RICO case. And the feds are notorious for it, and God bless them. I love working with them, but they take their time. We at Homicide are, let's go, rush, get this person off the street. Because this guy that just did this murder in front of a bunch of people is a threat to the community. That's how we see it.
Now he's in jail, I'm assuming, right? Like you got this all on tape, so you guys want to get him behind bars. The feds want to build a case, but he's still I'm assuming he's not going to be let out on bail. So
he's on the streets.
Oh, he's on the street.
He's on the streets. We don't arrest him
What?
at the request of the feds.
Wow.
But it's not like you watch this show, The First 48, right? Which is, to me, it's creative editing. Because I've never heard of that, solving a case in 48 hours. I've never had an autopsy done in 48 hours. I've never had phone warrants come back in 48 hours. It should be, it's the first 48 is bullshit. So it's a great show. It's a great premise for a show. But I've had a kid that killed a guy on a bus, on a metro bus. He was 20 years old, and he was antagonizing this guy that was twice his size. And the guy comes to assault him, and he shoots him with the little MAC-10 gun that he had, killed him on the bus. He flees the bus. One of his video games falls out of his backpack. We see that. We DNA swab it. It comes back to him. He had DNA on file, and we arrest him. So I go to interview him. Going off topic, I apologize. I go to interview him, and I say, hey, we want to talk to you about the case. And he goes, nah. He goes, I watched the first 48, and I see what happens. When people do this happens. And he puts his hands behind his back like they're handcuffed. I said, that freaking show. And he didn't talk, but I didn't need him to talk. I had the whole murder.
I'm sure we could do a whole
Oh,
episodes about
yeah.
how maybe the people you come across are influenced by media and what they
for
think's
sure.
going to happen to
Yeah.
them.
It's actually funny
Yeah.
to see and hear. But anyways, so we start conducting more of our investigation. The important part was, like I said, that Dodge Charger that crashed into a car. So there's a national database for insurance companies that they put these cars into the system, right? And what did our boy do? Filed a claim. Shame on him. So we find out where that car's at. We go to the tow yard in Santa Fe Springs and the body shop, and they're just about done with the car, fixing the bumper, right? The rear bumper. But what they didn't do is do anything to the interior. And once we got to the interior, we wrote a search warrant for the car. This is more not first 48 stuff.
Right.
This is a few weeks stuff. And we wrote paper on the car, which search warrants we call paper. And what did we find? We found Joe Loza's blood on the floorboard of that car. And that's DNA testing. And that takes a long time unless you get approval from the higher ups to expedite that testing. So we knew the person limping to the car that witnesses saw was Joe Loza, who had probably been shot, right? So we go back to the feds with that, and about a month later is when we did our takedowns. We put a surveillance team on him. We put a surveillance team on Joe Loza, and it just so happened when Joe Loza left his house, he had Leonardo Antolin, the other suspect, in the car with him. So they ended up doing a traffic stop. They arrest him, and they find 2 guns in the car. But those 2 guns were not our murder weapons. But they were gangsters driving around with 2 guns. We wrote a search warrant to take photos of Loza's body, and what do we see? We find an old scar from a gunshot wound that went through and through on calf muscle, basically no bone.
How long after the murder did you have to get this guy in pocket?
A month.
Okay.
A month. And it would have been much quicker, but the feds asked us to hold on. And if you Google it, you look at the name of the operation, it was called Operation Frog Legs. And it was an FBI takedown because the gang is known in Spanish. It's an English version of it is the Singing Frogs. So they called it Operation Frog Legs.
I think we got a name for the episode.
There you go.
So we did the takedowns. Loza, probably one of the most respectful guys I've ever met in my life. But he was a big boy. Stone killer, wasn't disrespectful. Said, I have nothing to say. Whatever you found in my family's houses is all mine. Because we found a bunch of paraphernalia in family members of his homes. And he said, it's all mine. Just put it all on me. I stashed it there. The other kid didn't talk. We didn't need them to talk. But they were the 2 star pupils of the federal government's RICO case. We filed it in state court. And 2 weeks later, the feds asked us if they could take it, and we did. So we were sitting in, I remember, I'll never forget it, sitting in federal court with about 20 defendants. And just to tell you a crazy spin to this story is, I grew up in that neighborhood where this gang is from. So some of these guys at the defense table were people I grew up with. and people I recognize. And I don't know if they recognize me. I was a kid. Some of these guys are much older than me, but I think they understand the nature of the business. I do what I do. It's nothing personal. You do what you do. We chose different paths. I don't look down on you for what you did. You were good to me. You were good to my family when I was a kid, but I've got a job to do. And my responsibility, regardless of who Dominic Gonzalez was, I have a responsibility to him and his family to find justice. I never use the word closure. I hate the word closure because you never get closure when your loved one gets killed. I know this personally. I just recently, in the last few months, I had an uncle that was killed in Lancaster, and I don't know if I told you. Oh, I think we did have this conversation.
Yeah.
It was my mom's brother, and we get emails daily on call-outs, and it gives a brief description on who's responding, where they're responding to, and what type of call it is. And I never thought that one of the emails coming out would be, one of my family members. And
Sorry
my
to hear
mom,
that.
thank you, I appreciate that. My mom to this day still cries. She's not gonna have closure. These family members don't, because there's birthdays, holidays, celebrations that loved one will never be at again. So the case was tried, and all of them were convicted, and my two guys were convicted of the murder. And one of them, Joe Loza, who they consider very dangerous, is at the federal prison in Colorado, which is the highest security risk inmates in the country. It's where the Unabomber was. The various people throughout the country that who are infamous for crimes are in that prison.
Yeah, ADX is one of the highest security, which is, that in and of itself reflects not only on the seriousness of this particular incident, but on the magnitude of Joe Loza on our community, to put him in a place where he literally is locked down 24 hours a day. That, to me, speaks volumes about the impact you had in terms of resolving this case.
Yeah. So,
And I'm curious too. We talked a little bit about some of these guys obviously being accepting and resigning to what their future may look like and how they protect themselves out of incarceration for protecting themselves while in incarceration. So going to a place like ADX, is there still like a Mexican Mafia or like Mafia dynamics at that facility?
yeah.
And are these guys just kind of, they're like, hey, this is just the next life is behind bars and let's go? I don't know.
The best thing about these type of inmates, is they adapt to everything. You can throw anything at them and they adapt. So they're always going to find a way to conduct business, always. How they're conducting in Colorado, not quite sure, but they always find a way. They always find a way to communicate. I'm working a murder right now, a double murder with the Aryan Brotherhood. And these guys were communicating with cell phones that were smuggled to them in prison, Northern California, ordered to hit in Lomita in the South Bay, because they perceived two of these guys as a threat to them. So it happens. It happens every day. The way they conduct business in prisons is insane, how genius they are with all this scandalous behavior that they can do, and they get away with it for the most part.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, I know one of the episodes we're addressing is LA County in particular with AB 109, and how sort of the politics of prisons has now hit inside the confines of our custody facilities here. Would you say that to be the case?
Yeah, 100%. A lot of the policy changes in California are not for law enforcement, would be the best thing to say about that. It's suspect, inmate friendly, right? You see it constantly. You see it in these takeovers of these colleges. These people are getting arrested in these universities, and they're being cited in the field, which before, when you blocked a freeway or you took over a college campus or whatever the case may be, you got on a bus and you went to the county jail, and they took their sweet time in citing you out or booking you or releasing you. But you got a feel for what it's like to be booked into a county jail. County jails and I know this because we handle deaths all the time in the county jail, they're gross. They're disgusting, right? Every time I go to a county jail, and I just handled this scene like 2 months ago, I walk out of there with pink eye. I walk out of there with some virus I've never had before. And I wasn't putting my head down on a mattress or, sharing drinks with anybody. It's disgusting.
You don't walk in there with a hazmat suit?
No.
You should.
I cover this nice suit. And,
Yeah. Gotta protect the hair.
Yeah. So yeah, it's insane.
And
But they don't learn their lesson. When you cite them out in the field, when you write them a ticket and they walk away from you with a smile on their face, what purpose did that serve? There has to be stricter punishments for what's going on, and you see it with retail thefts, right? Nobody's afraid to get arrested for retail theft.
And it's interesting, just to go back to your this case, Louie, with Joe Loza, when he was in custody at LA County Jail, how much respect was he given by his inmates, and to what extent did that have an impact on all the inmates around him?
Yeah, they put him in a module, which is notorious for a lot of the Mexican Mafia guys. It's where Joe Morgan was when they brought him down from prison. It's where Richard Ramirez was, the true and popular,
the real
popular Richard Ramirez, the good-looking Richard. So that's where they put him in the high-profile modules, where they keep away from everybody, but they can still conduct business. Trustees that walk down the row and sweep and mop the rows, they know who they are. They can get the message to the trustees and into the population. So he definitely, to me, he earned my respect because he was very respectful. If you act like an adult when you're in that situation, I'm not the bad guy. I'm the guy that holds you accountable. You treat me with respect, I'll always treat them with respect because it's a give and take. And, I don't feel sorry for suspects. I feel sorry for families of victims, regardless of who our victim is. Like I said, we don't
I'm
choose our
100%
victims.
with you on that.
Yeah.
I just have one last question. I don't know if you guys have any. How arduous was the trial in convicting these individuals?
It's funny you say that because we had a judge, it was a federal court, which we don't go to federal court a lot, but we do. It's different. And this judge was no nonsense, no BS, just to the point. She was on these attorneys to stay on target. So they separated the murder case from all the other RICO cases. It took about only a week, which is a pretty quick trial, considering all the DNA evidence, because they fought it. What did they have to lose, right? The whole thing was on video, but they fought everything we did, every search warrant we did. But it was pretty intense. I remember there were more security in that courtroom than there were actual jurors. But it was one of the most well-run trials I've ever been in. Yeah, really, really well done. But it was intense because you're talking about something intense, like a murder for hire. And but we got a conviction, and that's the bottom line. That's what you want.
Did you learn during that time that was Joe Loza good for any other murders aside from the one that you were able to convict him on?
Yeah, we don't suspect him of any other murders. I think we would have had some indication if he was involved in any. But at the time, and to this day, I still look into a lot of my old cases that have been adjudicated. I can't say that I suspect him of doing anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is there something that, right, obviously each case is going to be just as intense and different that you do see, but is there some sort of learning or takeaway that you do sort of get towards the end of a case, whether that's working with the system or an agency like the feds, or maybe just something gang related on your process?
I think the thing I've learned the most, and I lecture this in schools and homicide schools where we teach investigators on how to handle cases, is how to deal with the media. And I like to tell people, use the media or work with the media for your benefit. There's a lot of people when I came into the job were, no, stay away from the media, they'll screw you, or they'll do you wrong. And I find it quite the opposite. They'll help you, especially now with the existence of social media.
Right.
I've had cases where children have been missing. I knew they were dead, but I just couldn't prove it. I didn't have a bloody crime scene, but I knew they were dead. They were gone. We couldn't find them. Last seen with one of the parents. But using the media, doing press conferences, is when you start getting your information, because there are a lot of people that'll probably watch this episode and watch the news that are amateur sleuths, right? They think they're homicide detectives. When you go to the press, you will get a phone call from every person that is mind reader, psychic, and they're all wrong. I've had some, like when you go to the press, just be prepared to get phone calls from weirdos, like weirdos of society. It happens. It does. But you've got to filter those out.
Right.
Because there may be some weirdo that's actually right.
Right.
It hasn't happened to me yet, but you'll get calls from everybody. But using the media will help you a lot on your case because you're going to generate a lot of information off of it.
Interesting. So technology's played a big sort of catalyst.
100%.
Spreading information.
Yeah, there are certain media people in the local news, you know, KTLA, Fox, that I like to use for their social media stuff, and I'll send them a flyer. They'll put it on their social media, and boom, you know, I'll start getting responses.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
You can search all of this online, searching for Joe Loza. It's all on the web. It sounds like it was in 2020 when the convictions were made.
Correct.
Obviously, long time investigating the RICO, Vicar, everything. Thank you so much for sharing this with us today. Thank you for making our streets safer. And you know, hopefully we can you know, help make your baseball dreams come true or something one of these days.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah,
Go
you
Giants.
box for the department. They don't have any baseball tournaments.
I used to play softball for the department, but I got hurt the last tournament getting out of the car to walk to the field, and that's when I knew my career.
Yeah, there we go.
I just want to touch on one last thing that you had mentioned about youth in the community and how you were sort of a mentor, had these programs.
Yeah.
Is there still a lot of that exists today?
I think there is. At the time, it was in Santa Fe Springs, and I wanted to give back to the neighborhood I grew up in and the gym I used to box at. So I was really interested in doing it, and it was an off-duty job, so they were paying me in my off-duty time to do it. But I think there is, but I don't know if it's as prevalent as the city did it, the city of Santa Fe Springs. They even had an activity center where they hired deputies just to hang out with kids while they played, you know, pinball or foosball or whatever the case may be, just so they saw a different side of us.
Right.
You know, they didn't see me, you know, in this rented suit. They saw me in jeans and a polo shirt, right? And that's the thing. A lot of these kids are intimidated by us when we're in uniform, but they see a different version of us. You know, this suit comes off, they'll see all the tattoos and, you know, all the craziness that comes with me.
Yeah.
But we're, you know, just like everybody else.
Just another human.
Only unfortunate, or not the fortunate part is, you know, I've lived a paramilitary life for the last 36 years because that's what we do. But,
That's for sure.
Yeah.
All
Thank you
right.
for your service.
All right, welcome to Have You Heard? For those of you not familiar or who just tuning in for the first time, it's our viral crime section where we're taking the latest and the greatest that's happening in the world of crime, murder, homicide, and getting our expert witness, expert testimony, whatever we want to call it, from Uncle Rich and get his reactions. A fun little new series for us today. Hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, we got a
I'm gonna
good one.
Yeah, we got a good one. Chris, you got one you want to share with us here?
Absolutely. So the location of this case happens in Ivins, Utah. I'm sure you've heard a lot about this, but this is about the Ruby Frank momfluencer case. So it's a disturbing story about child abuse. And I don't know if any of you know about Ruby Frank, but she's a very popular YouTube vlogger with the show called 8 Passengers. She's garnered about 2.5 million followers. However, behind the scene, her associate, Jody Hildebrandt, and her were subjecting her 2 children to kind of horrific scenes of physical and emotional torture. And so we have a clip here which is going to be showing a little bit of how this story unfolded. Right now you see the son of Ruby coming in. He is age 12 years old, and this is him actually trying to first ring camera at one of the neighbors' houses. So 10:46 a.m. he gets to the second home, rings the doorbell, there's no response. He starts to walk away, and then we hear a voice come on from the resident. And right now, the son is a little bit disheveled, asking for a few favors. And the first one is he's going to ask about the nearest police station and calling 911. Here we see the neighbor coming out, trying to understand what's going on. And you see the neighbor on the phone right now with 911. EMTs arrive at scene, And when they do arrive, we'll start to learn that it's an extremely emotional and heavy case. They see that the son had bandages, duct tape around his wrists and his ankles. As the deputies do search the house, so they eventually go over to one of the neighbors' houses, which ends up being the associate Jody Hildebrandt. And the timeline is the cops arrive around the house to about 11:40 a.m. to Jody's house. They knock on the door. When Jody does answer, the first words that she says is she's actually on the phone, and she says that she has her attorney on the phone. So immediately she knew that something was up. Cops go in, they clear the house. It's a huge 10,000 square foot compound of a house. So there's hallways, there's multiple bedrooms, bathrooms, and then they eventually hit one room and they see, so here they are searching right now. It's just kind of a very eerie scene. There's rooms with not a lot of things in it, multiple bedrooms, not a lot of furniture in there. It's a compound, 10,000 square feet. So this is one of the main deputies that walks into a room and he finds the daughter here. And she's just sitting in the middle of this room, not really saying anything. She's completely shocked, very eerie. She's obviously been through a lot of emotional stress, a lot of physical harm as well. And it turns out that the brother hadn't seen his sister in about over a month. And the disturbing thing is that they were in the same home for over a month, just in different parts of the home, and hadn't seen each other. And so after about 2 hours, this deputy tries to calm the child, tries to have a conversation with them, brings up the topic of pizza. And as we know, they hadn't eaten. And so that's what really breaks the ice with her. She finishes a whole large pizza. They order another one. She finishes about half of that pizza. And then police continue while this is going on. They continue to search the home. And they end up finding a secret room that's kind of all concrete, very eerie. And inside this room, they find handcuffs, ropes. There's this separate room in this home here. And do you remember the saran wrap?
Mm-hmm.
So basically what the mom and Jody, her associate, would do is they would put a mixture of cayenne pepper and honey on these children's wounds, and they would then wrap their limbs with saran wrap and then duct tape. So another form of torture. They found a small trampoline. They would force these kids to jump for multiple hours on the trampoline in the hot Utah sun.
Now these are the momfluencer's kids?
Yes.
And she's torturing her own kids?
Yes, along with her associate Jody. When they arrest her right here, she's very stoic, not really saying anything. Doesn't ask anything about how her kids are doing, if they're alive. So just a really kind of disturbing case.
I mean, she's a big YouTube influencer, right? Like, do you recall how many subs she's got on YouTube or how many types of views she gets?
Yeah, so amassed over about 2.5 million. So huge force. Would show like scenes about her 6 kids and, you know, kind of go into the daily life. But then the videos started to turn a little bit more controversial. And then as we see with this news breaking, there was a lot more disturbing things happening behind the scenes.
Uncle Rich, what is this? What as a homicide detective, what rolls through your head immediately?
First and foremost, PTSD. I unfortunately have the dubious distinction of handling a number of child death investigations, to the extent I actually went to Denver, Colorado for a week's training just so I could get more adapted to what was going on. For whatever reason, I got sent to a number of these cases. To see an abuse case like this where the actual children survived is actually a blessing, even though these children are going to have to live with this experience for the rest of their lives, and they're going to need a lot of psychological counseling. But at the same token, when I seen this video, I said to myself, this is the quintessential definition of no one knows what's going on behind closed doors. And I handled a horrific case, which, by the way, is still in the process. Bill Walsh from America's Most Wanted and I worked together on this case where this child was 9 years old. It was continually being molested by her stepfather. And ultimately, she ended up having 2 kids from this man. And it was on CNN, as a matter of fact, to the extent that she was, obviously, this man eventually killed her. But the sensitivity associated with these cases and the abuse that goes on regarding the death of children and the abuse of children is just mind-boggling, in particular the fact that they have no say, especially when you get kids that are younger than 3 or 4 years old and they're living through these monstrous experiences. I'm sorry for being totally sensitive to this issue, but I look at this and I see these cops who have made that discovery, and now they also are going to live with that experience. It is traumatic, guys. It really is. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, multiply. This is a small town in Utah. Multiply that for me or any of the other guys that I work with in this particular world. And now we see with almost pretty much on a weekly or monthly basis. And you multiply that by 17 years. It does take its toll on you guys. And I would just say this much. I've worked with Family and Social Services and Department of Family and Children's Services. I won't even go there in terms of what has, basically happened with that relationship with me. But I'll just tell you, it culminated in one case up in Lancaster with 4 of these individuals being indicted. The case was eventually dismissed, but 4 of those employees from the Department of Family and Children's Services were actually indicted for lack of not doing anything.
Wow.
So we could channel that off in various directions, just to let you know.
If we can hop over to about 10 minutes in, I just want you guys to see the room here. So in this video at, let's see, at about the 10-minute mark of the Ruby Frank case, you're going to see this room. And my first sort of inclinations reminded me of that movie Saw. Do you remember that movie Saw? It was just this very brutalistic, raw. So here we're going to see this kind of secret room that they found in this compound.
Mm-hmm.
So here it is right now, all concrete, very eerie. Flash on the lights, and they find this safe right here. And once opening that up, it's a whole separate room, kitchen, and this is where they find all the evidence and kind of all the torture.
Yeah, that's mind-boggling, to say the least.
Absolutely. And, to have a very popular vlogger that's on YouTube, who knows how long this abuse has been happening. Like you said, we have no idea what happens behind the scenes, but finally came out.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The first thing I saw when I looked at that video, and whether this child had met their demise or they're actually functionally still alive, first thing I saw was malnutrition. 100%. I could see the staggering of the legs, the thinness of their body. And we're talking a 12-year-old. I mean, there should be, at least 100 pounds. And this young boy is probably no more than maybe 40 to 50 pounds at best.
Very sad.
So
Very
really
sad.
is sad. And again, if we ever want to, we could delve into some of those. And I think we did address that in season 1 with regards to the Shaking Baby case, which I think was unprecedented in terms. I don't think no blogging or any podcast ever addressed the issue of a Shaking Baby case, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, with Shaking Baby, I have as you guys know, I have a 6-week-old at home, and they can cry, and my wife and I are super careful since that case, especially. We're just like, are we shaking? Are we like rocking? We're not shaking her. Are we rocking her too hard? Like, what is going on with, like, we were uber cautious, but I hate these children's stories. This is insane. And it's a influencer who makes money clearly off being a mother and treating her kids like this. I hope justice is served. Obviously more facts will probably come out, but it does not look good. I have another quick story that I'd love your reactions on, Uncle Rich. that I don't want to say I'm story topping Chris, but there's another interesting story out of the Carolinas, and you'll see the clip here of it's a pastor's wife named Micah Miller, who was found dead at a local state park, and they found a gun on the side of her. She was in her car, and it appears she has killed herself. And that's how the cops have sort of ruled it. They're still investigating. Since one of her friends discovered her death, I guess on TikTok, I believe, and was like, hold on a minute. There's probably more to this here. And what we learn is that her name is Micah Miller, and the family wants proof that she actually killed herself, and the family's contending that it may actually be her husband. Her husband is a well-known pastor in the area who has shown a lot of remorse and has been sort of out there saying that his wife wasn't doing well.
Right.
And we learned through various mediums that she was actually listening to self-help podcasts that was found through like a Ring camera footage, and you see her and her husband here.
And
go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and right here. So this is her friend that discovered this murder that went viral on TikTok, and this is how she found out about it. What was interesting about this is when you kind of look back into the testimonies of what her friends and also her sister were saying, was that 2 days before Micah was actually found dead with a gunshot wound, which was on April 27th, Micah had served her husband with divorce papers on April 25th. So this was just 2 days prior to her death. Now, she had always warned her family members that if she were to ever be found with a bullet in her head, that it was not going to be by her, but by JP, who she's referring to, her husband at the time.
Which kind of also, not to bring something else up, but like that's what the Boeing whistleblower who was killed apparently had said to his family too, right?
Yep.
I mean, was he killed or did he kill himself? I don't know. We don't know.
Right.
That's the reporting. But what's really sad about this case about Micah is, or not sad, but atypical in the stories. This is her husband's a pastor, respected in the community. He's got a marriage. He was married before. He's had children from previous marriage, 5 of them, who she was helping raise.
Correct.
And there are text messages and emails that have been uncovered of him saying that he was going to hurt her or cause pain in some sort. So those are all worrying facts when you're going through the case. The family's urged to look into this further. The pastor delivered like a very chilling 20-minute sermon at church, over remorse over the loss of his wife. But we also learned later on that there's probably more to this. She's been a member of the church, and I think he was courting her since she was 15 years old.
Right.
And I guess he's also had accusations with being involved with other members of the church, or perhaps might have been underage. So this story is now starting to catch a lot more steam because there's so many layers to the onion that are being peeled back. Uncle Rich, like when you see a story like this, if you put yourself in the detective's shoes or whatnot, clearly here the authorities did an early determination that it could be suicide, but new evidence has presented itself. What is that fine line? We heard in the episode with Luis on like state wants to move fast, feds sometimes want to move slow, but like what's that fine line on how quickly you move? There's damning evidence, but oh wait, there may be more. How are you juggling that timeline?
Well, let's first address the suicide.
Sure.
And that being said, you have to look at it, and I've handled, and here again I go.
Yeah.
I've handled hundreds, if not thousands, of suicides. I mean, and there's various methods. Matter of fact, I even had this one guy, he actually bought a book on how to kill yourself. There's a book, I won't try to advertise that book.
Right.
But specifically associated with that particular suicide, you have to look at the circumstance. I've even had suicides being fabricated, okay, on a couple of occasions. But generally speaking, suicides are sort of investigated in the context of, let's see what we got here first. And that's the reason why they send out a homicide investigator for these suicides, for specifically to determine if there was foul play afoot. That would be the first focus of any investigator who goes out there. Now, that said, we look at the position of the gun, and we've always encouraged, please do not take the gun out of that person's hand. There's no need. And we have had, really bad practices in terms of, I don't know why. Why would you want to take a gun out of a dead person's hand? But I digress. I would look at that specifically. Now, as far as expanding outward, we could then look at, all of these other issues, but we have to first look at the crime scene or lack thereof, because the suicide technically does not qualify as a crime scene. It basically qualifies, as we know, suicide means basically, taking your own life versus homicide, which means the taking of someone's life. So that said, my first focus would be to see specifically what we have and then expand out, because we have had on a number of occasions families would not in any way accept their loved one wanting to take their own life. That has been one of the biggest and most ominous issues we've had, is for a family to in some way accept that their loved one would take them out. Now, we could talk about drug overdoses by way of fentanyl, which is evidently a chronic problem in this country right now. But when we talk about suicide by gunshot, understand that the coroner's office is immediately going to take a gunshot residue test of that person's web of their hand to see if any gunshot residue, because when you fire a gun, automatically that residue is going to fall on their head. So, and if there's none there, it doesn't necessarily disqualify as a suicide still, but it does add one more element. And I'll just go even further. Now all of a sudden, okay, we put all of these circumstances together and we say, okay, I think it's, it's the husband. And now we take it to the district attorney's office. And they either one or two things. They either laugh us right out of the office, or they accept it as a potential defendant. Now, you as the investigator have to go in there and convince a jury that this person did this. So there is a lot to these things when it comes to, and I could talk about a number of cases where the family refused to accept the death of their loved one.
And I was just reading, so some news also came out too of the Robertson County Medical Examiner did classify this, that she did die from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. How often, once this report does come through, is that kind of final say? Is that like enough to kind of, because how it's kind of trending right now on the internet is it's either the murder of a pastor's wife or it's the pastor's wife's suicide. So
right.
We can see both sides, but then you have, an authority.
The coroner, yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting. When you have the county authority saying that this is a suicide, or you could even say it was an accident or whatever, because there's been occasionally where I've known police officers who are cleaning their guns and it goes off on them. But here's the deal. It doesn't necessarily prevent you as an independent family member to bring in somebody else's opinion. So you can, in fact, bring another pathologist in. Those are technically what they call a coroner, to make their own opinion. Because remember, at the end of the analysis, all they're doing is formulating an opinion. You can have a differing opinion by way of saying, look, I got, Dr. So-and-so who does independent investigations, and we've seen that countless times, especially on officer-involved shootings, where they'll do certain things. But point being is that when you have an independent, now you can look at this and look at it in a more sort of unbiased way, if you will.
Cool. Got it. We'll see how this thing develops.
Yeah.
It's Micah Miller's case, and also the pastor's wife is probably what's trending. But thanks for your thoughts.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
That was great. Fantastic. Louie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. It was fun.